Blue and red lights flashed behind her car, cutting through the darkness like warning beacons. Tasha Williams, a 32-year-old nurse, exhaled deeply and eased her foot off the gas. The night had been long. 14 hours on her feet, tending to patients, holding hands of the sick, changing 4 bags, and fighting sleep in the fluorescent glow of the hospital. Her scrubs still carried faint stains of coffee and disinfectant. Her mind was foggy, but she was finally heading home. Probably just a taillight, she murmured to herself, forcing a tired smile as she pulled over to the side of the quiet Georgia highway. But when she looked in her rearview mirror, her stomach tightened. 2 patrol cars, not one, had pulled up behind her. That wasn't normal. She watched as 4 officers stepped out, their flashlights slicing through the night. Their shadows stretched long across the road, their movements quick and commanding. A soft unease began to crawl up her spine. She rolled down her window halfway, keeping both hands on the steering wheel, just like her mother had taught her. "Keep your hands where they can see them, baby," she'd always said. "Be polite. Stay calm." One officer approached her driver's side, his hand already resting on his holster. Another circled toward the passenger door. The other 2 hung back, scanning the empty highway like backup in a battlefield. Tasha forced a polite smile. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "Evening, ma'am." "Step out of the vehicle," the taller one said, voice clipped and cold. Tasha blinked, caught off guard. "Step out? Did I do something wrong?" He leaned closer to the window, his flashlight beam catching her face. "Step out of the vehicle. Now." Her heartbeat picked up. She glanced at the side mirror. 3 more pairs of eyes were fixed on her every move. "Okay," she said softly, trying not to sound nervous. She reached slowly toward her purse. "I just need to grab my license." The officer's tone hardened instantly. "Hands where I can see them." Tasha froze. "It's just my license." "Ma'am, step out of the car." Now, her breath hitched. Every instinct told her to obey. She unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped into the cold night air with her hands raised slightly. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes. The road was silent except for the low hum of police radios. She tried to stay calm, tried to make her voice steady. "Can you tell me what's going on?" The nearest officer didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her arm roughly and spun her toward the hood of her car. "Hey, you don't have to," she started to say. "Stop resisting," he barked. Pain shot up her wrist as metal pressed against her skin. Tasha's confusion turned to terror. Her mind screamed, "What did I do? Why are they doing this?" The night that began with flashing lights was about to become the darkest moment of her life. The routine stop was no longer routine. It was the start of something far more brutal. It happened so fast, it barely felt real. Before Tasha could even process what was happening, one officer shoved her chest first onto the hood of her car. The metal was cold against her cheek, the smell of engine oil filling her nose. Another officer yanked open his baton with a sharp click that sliced through the night air like a threat. "Please, what did I do?" Tasha gasped, her voice shaking. "Stop resisting arrest," barked the officer behind her. But she wasn't resisting, she was frozen. Her hands were open, palms flat on the hood, her body trembling. Every breath came short and fast, panic closing in on her chest. Then it came, the first blow. The baton struck her thigh with a sickening thud. The pain was blinding, hot, electric. Before she could even cry out, another swing came, this time across her shoulder. Her knees buckled, but the officers didn't stop. They surrounded her like predators circling prey. "Please, I'm a nurse. I just came from work," she screamed, the words breaking between sobs. But mercy wasn't in their eyes. From the quiet neighborhood across the road, a light flicked on. A middle-aged man peered out through his blinds, his face twisting in horror. He fumbled for his phone and started recording. His voice could be heard whispering on the clip that would later go viral. "Oh my God, they're beating her. They're really beating her." The officers shouted over each other, "Get down. Hands behind your back. Stop moving." Even though she was already down, already crying, already bleeding. The baton struck again. One hit her back, another clipped her arm. The pain pulsed through her like fire. Her ears rang with the sounds of metal against flesh, the hiss of their radios, her own ragged breathing. She collapsed onto the ground, gravel biting into her palms. The cold pavement pressed against her face as tears streamed down, mixing with sweat and a trace of blood. Her phone buzzed on the hood of the car, lighting up with her mother's name, Mom calling. If only she could answer. If only someone could hear her. But she couldn't move. Every time she flinched, another officer yelled, "Stop resisting!" and another strike followed. Finally, one officer knelt beside her, breathing hard. His gloved hand pressed against the back of her neck, forcing her face into the ground. Then, through the ringing in her ears, she heard it, a low, cold voice. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." The words burned through her fear like gasoline. Something deep inside her, the part that had always kept her calm, polite, obedient, began to crack. She'd spent her life helping people, healing others, holding dying hands. But now, the very people sworn to protect were hurting her. Her fingers curled into fists. Her pulse pounded in her temples. Something inside her snapped, not from rage, but from survival. In that moment, Tasha Williams stopped being the quiet nurse who just wanted to go home. She became a woman fighting to live. Years of fear turned into fire. All her life, Tasha Williams had done everything right. She paid her bills on time. She followed the rules. She smiled when people looked uneasy around her, just to seem less threatening. She kept her head down, worked hard, stayed polite, because that's what her mother had taught her. But that night, the rules she'd lived by shattered like glass under a baton. Pain radiated through her body. The officer's shouts blurred together. Her breathing came fast and shallow. Then, as one of them reached for his taser, something primal inside her broke free. It wasn't anger. It was instinct. Survival. In one burst of adrenaline, she pushed herself off the ground, staggering to her feet. Her vision tunneled. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. One officer stepped forward, baton raised again, but this time she didn't cower. She kicked out, connecting hard with his leg. He stumbled back with a grunt of surprise. The other officers hesitated, momentarily thrown off by her sudden defiance. Her hand brushed against something cold, a drop baton lying in the dirt. She grabbed it. Tight. Her knuckles turned white as she lifted it, her arms trembling but her eyes burning with fury and fear. "Get back," she shouted, her voice hoarse but unshakable. For the first time that night, the officers didn't advance. They froze, for men, trained and armed, stunned that the woman they'd beaten was now standing tall, blood streaking her face, defiance blazing in her eyes. Across the street, the neighbor's camera caught every second. The shaky footage would later become the video that shook the world, but in that moment, it was just Tasha, breathing hard, standing against the impossible. One officer shouted, "Ma'am, drop the weapon." Tasha's chest heaved. "Then stop hitting me," she yelled back, the baton trembling in her grip. The words hung in the air, raw and electric. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Only the faint sound of her mother's unanswered call buzzed from the car hood. Then, in the distance, came the growing wail of sirens. Back up. Red and blue lights painted the scene again, flickering across her bloodied face. But this time, she didn't run. She didn't cry. She just stood there, every muscle in her body shaking, but unbroken. When more police cars arrived, the new officers rushed in, not to beat her, but to separate the chaos. They pulled the other officers back, shouting over the confusion. "Everyone stand down." Tasha dropped the baton slowly, her chest rising and falling as she sank to her knees. The fight drained from her body all at once. Hands grabbed her wrists, snapping on cold metal cuffs, but she didn't resist. As they led her to the cruiser, she glanced back once at the shattered glass, the flashing lights, the baton lying in the dirt. Her face was bruised, her eyes swollen, but behind that pain burned something fierce. She didn't know it yet, but that night, the night she fought back, would change everything. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. By morning, the video of Tasha's brutal arrest had exploded across the internet. Someone had uploaded it to social media with the caption, "Black nurse beaten during traffic stop." Then she defends herself. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Millions of people clicked, watched, and gasped. The footage was raw, shaky, emotional, showing every baton strike, every scream, every desperate plea. Viewers watched in disbelief as Tasha was slammed to the ground, then saw her rise again, blood on her face, holding a baton, standing her ground. "She's fighting for her life," one comment read. "This is what courage looks like," said another. By sunrise, the clip had been shared on every major platform. Hashtags filled the feeds. Hashtag Justice for Tasha. Hashtag End Police Brutality. Hashtag Stand with Nurses. Talk shows were already picking it up. News anchors replayed the footage again and again. The story dominated headlines. Routine traffic stop turns violent. Body cam footage contradicts police report. Nurse survives beating, sparks national outcry. Celebrities began to speak up. Athletes, actors, musicians, even politicians. One influencer tweeted, "She heals people for a living." And this is how they treated her? Enough is enough. In just 24 hours, Tasha Williams, a nurse from a small Georgia town, had become a national symbol of strength and injustice. The police department scrambled to respond. They released a brief statement claiming the officers feared for their safety. They said she was non-compliant. They said protocol was followed. But the truth was already out. Body cam footage leaked online, revealing everything. Tasha had obeyed every command. Her hands were visible. She posed no threat. The only aggression came from the very men sworn to protect her. Public anger boiled over. Within days, 2 of the officers were suspended pending investigation. Protesters gathered outside the police station, chanting her name. "Justice for Tasha" echoed through the streets. The mayor, under pressure from the media, called the incident deeply disturbing and unacceptable. Civil rights lawyers offered to represent her pro bono. And then, for the first time since that horrific night, Tasha herself spoke out. She sat in her hospital bed, her face bruised, but her eyes steady. Cameras surrounded her, microphones lined up in front. The room fell silent as she spoke. Her voice was soft, raspy, but powerful. "They thought they could silence me, but I'm still here. I want people to see what happens when we stop staying quiet." That one sentence echoed across the world. Clips of her words spread faster than the original video. People wept, shared, and marched. She didn't sound like a victim. She sounded like a survivor, like someone who had faced death and chosen courage. In the weeks that followed, murals appeared in cities across America. Paintings of Tasha standing tall, holding a baton not as a weapon, but as a symbol of resistance. She became more than just a headline. She became hope. Her story reminded millions that truth, no matter how long it's buried, can't be beaten down forever. 3 months later, Tasha Williams walked through the courthouse doors, not as a victim, but as a symbol. Outside, the air buzzed with chanting voices. Hundreds of supporters lined the courthouse steps, holding handmade signs that swayed in the morning wind. "Nurses heal. Don't harm them. Justice for Tasha. End police brutality." Camera flashes lit up her path as she moved slowly through the crowd. Her arm was still healing, but her spirit stood tall. Each step she took echoed like defiance against every injustice that had tried to break her. Inside, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled every seat, cameras crowded the back wall, and whispers rippled through the rows as Tasha took her place beside her lawyer. The officers sat on the opposite side, their faces expressionless, their lawyers armed with thick folders and rehearsed excuses. They tried to twist the story, calling her aggressive, threatening, non-compliant. They said she provoked the officers. They tried to erase the truth that millions had already seen with their own eyes. But the truth doesn't die that easily. When the judge ordered the body cam and cell phone footage to be played in court, the room fell silent. Everyone watched as the grainy video played across the screen. Tasha's trembling hands, the baton strikes, the screams for help, the moment she stood up with courage burning in her eyes. When the final frame froze, Tasha bleeding but unbroken, the silence was deafening. The judge's face hardened. He slammed his gavel once, the sound echoing through the chamber. This, he said firmly, was not a routine stop. This was an abuse of power. A murmur swept through the crowd. Then came the words Tasha had been praying to hear. All charges dropped. Tears welled in her eyes as her lawyer gripped her hand. Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers that shook the courthouse steps. The city, forced to confront its own failures, announced an immediate internal investigation into police misconduct. 2 officers were dismissed. Policy reforms began, and Tasha, the nurse who had once just wanted to go home after a long shift, suddenly found herself at the center of a national movement. 6 months later, she stood on a stage in Atlanta, the sun setting behind her. The rally stretched for blocks. Nurses, activists, mothers, students, thousands of people who had been inspired by her courage. As the crowd chanted her name, she took the microphone, her voice calm and steady. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted to live. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But if my fight helps one more woman survive, then it was worth it. The audience roared. Tears, applause, fists raised in unity. Behind her, a massive banner waved in the breeze. Routine stop. Real courage. That night, Tasha's story wasn't just her own. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, beaten down, or afraid to speak. Her journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming power, about showing that even in a world that tries to silence you, your voice can rise above the noise. And that sometimes one woman's courage can be louder than 1,000 batons.